Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you a little dose of reality.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Real Talk Fins Talk. I'm your host, Steve Malloy, and we've got an all-star cast tonight. But before I introduce each one and every one of you, I want to thank everyone for checking in tonight in that chat. Make sure you hit that like button and hit that subscribe bell down there, and then share with your friends, your families, and your neighbors. And remember, we may not always agree everything Miami Dolphins, but there's one thing we can agree on. We are all Dolphins. All right, so let's get this show on the road. First thing I want to do is I want to introduce our guest on the panel show tonight. Number one, we got Finn Stanza from the Fins Talk Sports Network. Evan, what you got going on? And, of course, where can they find you and all that good stuff?
Oh, you know where you can find me on the Fins Talk Sports Network. I'm happy to be with you. I'm happy to be with Curtis and with Sean. No, you can catch me on Fins Talk Overtime. You can catch me on during the regular season on the pregame show, the postgame shows, and then you can catch me during draft season when we do our draft coverage. But you can catch me wherever you want on Twitter at Finstanza. But I'm part of the 51st state. I'm the lowly Canadian on the network, so I'm happy you guys include me on this network. That's why I got to represent with this logo.
All right, great. And then next we have Curtis from Ace Per Head. Curtis, what do you got going on at Ace Per Head?
I don't know. I don't got a whole list like Finstanza's got over there, man. That's a long list. You can just find me basically on YouTube at Ace Per Head, and you'll find Curtis over there. That's it, man. I need to get a bigger menu over here.
All right. Sean, Mr. Sean Williams, where can folks find you?
Yeah, I am on Twitter /X at Sean Williams with a 5, as you see in the box. If you want the not so positive content, I would say come find me, at least as of late. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right, that sounds great, man. And I appreciate you for coming on. I know you've been on the show once before, maybe a couple years back, if I'm not mistaken. You're friends with Britt Legacy?
Yeah.
Brett, yeah.
Right.
Brett, who does overtime with me. Brett does overtime.
I'm friends with a lot of people on Twitter.
Yeah.
Right. Got you.
I enjoy you, Sean. You're a fun dose of reality. Because
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Because if you guys don't know a little bit about me, when I first joined the network, I ran a show called the Fins Bandwagon, where I basically was all about positivity. I could find nothing wrong with the Miami Dolphins, to the point now where I was that guy after the Chargers game in McDaniel's first season that wanted McDaniel fired after that game. And I've been on the McDaniel fire train since that game for the last 2.5 years. So I'm basically, Sean, where you are. I basically have hit that level all season. I was like that all year, and it's been interesting. So I give that dose of reality. Steve is the one who texts me during games to tell me to be all sunshine and rainbows. He tells me, Evan, be more positive.
No way.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to talk about tonight, and basically, primarily, everybody knows we've required a bunch of folks in free agency, and I just want to get you guys' takes and how you feel about. And I'll start with you, Sean. How do you feel about this free agency, the acquisitions that we've gone on ahead and Chris Greer has made and all that? Just as a whole, a general overview. How do you feel?
Did you say me? You cut out for a second.
Get to go
Yes.
first.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, Sean. Yes.
So I feel about the same way that I did last offseason, in the sense that if you look at each deal and each player individually on their own, it's hard to find anything to complain with. But when you look at the broad spectrum of the team and the roster, to put it blunt, I think it's kind of a garbage class of free agents that we brought in. I can say something positive about just about every player. Like, I like Melon Fonwu a lot. I'm a big Syracuse fan. He's got a lot of potential. And same with Ashton Davis, but neither of them are starting safeties, and both of them right now are slotted to be starting safeties. I think everybody unanimously likes James Daniels with the common caveat, if healthy. Um, it's hard to complain about that one. I think the one that wasn't expected but could do a lot for us is Nick Westbrook Akine, especially from a blocking perspective. As we all know, we couldn't run the ball whatsoever when we
Mhm.
lost Jackson last year. He's somebody who can block outside, whereas the rest of the 6 foot and under squad doesn't do that very well. But overall, it's hard to be excited about whatever vision they have. And I do think there's some behind the scenes things going because as we knew, they could have opened up a lot more cap space. They chose not to touch Tua's contract. They chose not to do that with other guys, whether it be Brooks or Sealer. Um, so I don't know if that's Ross saying, "Look, I'm done. I'm done cutting the checks. You make it work with this group and the money you have, and we'll reevaluate after the season." I don't know, but it just seems like they're really sticking with what they got, and they're going the goodwill route in free agency so far. And unfortunately, there is a lot of holes left on the roster, in my opinion, that you can't expect to fill through the draft.
Yep, I agree 100%. Curtis, how do you feel?
Well, I like to always evaluate in two paths. The first path is the now. What's the evaluation for what's actually being done, and then it's the long term. You can incorporate the past. I don't like Greer. I think he's terrible. I've been riding the Greer's terrible train since 2021. But in order for me to be accurate, I have to cut off my emotion and the past and the future when I'm evaluating now. And this draft class is sort of like last year, but with less pop. Getting Campbell in last year was unbelievable. He is a Hall of Famer for like nothing. Yeah. He's a locker room leader and a presence in the trenches. We don't have that. There are guys, I think, that do bring something. I think Shauna mentioned it. Westbrook. I just did a podcast today talking about if you look at Hill, his ratio of slot to boundary wide receiver really shows when he's at his best. His best is always at 50% or near 50%, being the slot. And with Westbrook out there, he can block. He can play that boundary. You can have boundary of Waddle and Hill. Boundary of Waddle and Westbrook and then Hill in the slot. And there's things you can do that will force the safeties on both sides of the field to pause and to play it safe. The linebackers, they might sit at high leverage like I've talked about for a while, but they might not be able to drop as quick. And this should boost the pass game a little bit, but football is not going to be won through the pass game. So I do like Pharaoh Brown. I do like the addition of the inline tight end on the opposite of Jonnu. I think it's a good pickup, not a great pickup, but it's a boost from last year. So this is a broke team. They're broke. They're broke. We've all kind of known that 2023 was the peak season. We're broke. So they found a few pieces to go in and kind of be some depth, maybe some starters. They did the best with the little money they have. This whole offseason, this regime is going to be about this draft. They can't fill everything, but if they can get to coherency, and I don't want Greer to be back, but I got to evaluate fairly. If they can put enough pieces here to be coherent, they could buy themselves a second draft and a second free agency and maybe right the ship. So overall, this was patchwork. It was about as good as you could do with a few misses like Eichenberg and Carmen and maybe Madison. But it's all about the draft. If Greer does his normal draft, this thing will sink. If he does a Seattle or a Lions year one, then maybe something rises. So it was what it was. If that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. You make perfect sense. Evan, how about you? What's your take and how are you feeling?
I'm less the technical. I'm more the emotional when it comes to the offseason. As long as all none of these whoever they were going to sign in free agency wasn't going to move the needle for me, no matter who they signed, because had they signed somebody for big money, we would have said, oh, they're crazy. But if they would have, a lot of the players who I think that people and all the other podcasts have been saying that we should go after were not players I think that wanted to come to Miami. Like if you're in Miami, like I always look back, one of the first things that caught my eye before free agency in the offseason was when Reggie McKenzie said, I'm going to go home and I'll take a lateral position. I don't feel like being part of the staff anymore. And I said to myself, wait, why would that guy want to do that if he has a very comfortable job living in Miami? He's going to a team that's picking first in the draft. And he actually didn't get the GM job. So he actually got rejected by the team, but I'm going to go to them anyways. I said to myself, this is a season that as long as Chris Greer is the general manager, and especially if Mike McDaniel is the head coach, I don't believe that anything is going to come out of this until he proves me right. So, for example, you get a blocking tight end. Does he know how to use a blocking tight end? Or they're going to get Madison as a third down back. Well, he didn't use Jeff Wilson last year, who was his best third down back at all. So for me, it's all about, it doesn't matter who they sign. It's more about who the application of how they're used in the scheme. You and I talked about that a ton last season. So for me, I think in their mind, they already have the stars on their team. They're going to circle it back. The fact they're going to use the excuse that Tua got injured and Tua's going to learn his lesson again and he's going to become Fat Tua again. Tyreek Hill got arrested in the first game. That screwed up his wrist the whole year. Waddle had an injury all season. That's his thing. So for me, I think they're going to look at all those excuses and say, we already have the stars on our team. And as long as we fill the needs in all these areas, then we'll be fine. What concerns me is the fact that they have James Daniels, I'm okay with, but coming off an injury. But the fact that they have, just for the sake of, even if you bring him as a camp body, but if you go get a Brandon Scherf or you go get anybody who's not going to cost you a lot of money, you owe it to the fan base. I know we're not about the fans, but you owe it a little bit to the fan base you said on your end of your press conference, we know it's a problem. So how many years, Steve, did you say, and you played that video, you're more worried about the offensive line than we are? Well, you signed one true guard. If you go get the other guard and you're not happy with him, you make him a backup and you go draft someone. You can judge. Not a big deal. On the D-line, it's just Sealer right now. There's really no one there. I think they are hoping for Campbell to come back. I think they're relying on that, and that's why they haven't signed a defensive tackle yet. That, I think that's not a good concept. And in terms of a cornerback, I don't think you can go get an Asante Samuel. I think he could be inexpensive, Junior. He's injured, but bring in the bodies. It shouldn't cost you that much money to bring in these players. But I'm not shocked by what they've done because I never would have extended Tua, God forbid. The only player I would have adjusted, just because I think he earned it, is Sealer. Because you can actually extend Sealer, and it won't cause any dead cap, or if anything happens in the future, anything like that. But overall, nothing surprises me by what they've done, because even if they go draft all these players, it's all about the execution of the coaching staff. And as long as Mike McDaniel is your head coach, I don't care. For me, go and get Madison. He's a third down back. He's not going to use him in the right scheme. Unless Mike McDaniel gives up the play calling or has an epiphany or gets a lobotomy, nothing is going to change. It will be the same old, and we'll be in the same boat in 12 months from now. So I need to see a massive coaching change. It doesn't matter who they bring in. If the coach is still the same coach he was last season or the season before, it doesn't matter who we sign. You can go get any player you want. He will not use them properly.
Yeah. Good points. You all made some great points. And here's the thing. You mentioned Tua Tagovailoa and he got extended and everything. Well, what I like about this year is they didn't touch Tua's, they didn't reconstruct his contract. So that tells me that they're not completely set on Tua, that they're having some second doubts about him. So if they haven't done it by now, then I have a feeling that's one of the reasons why they brought in Zach Wilson. And I know a lot of people don't like Zach Wilson and all this kind of stuff. But to be honest with you, I believe Zach Wilson has a lot of potential. He's got a strong arm. He's mobile. Let's see what McDaniel can do with him in this system. I mean, he's definitely a step or two above Skylar Thompson and Tyler Huntley. So anyway, and then also you Curtis down there, he mentioned what's his name? Pharaoh Brown, the tight end that we brought in.
Pharaoh Brown.
Yeah. Okay.
Pharaoh Brown, excuse me.
So they brought him in. And I think he's a nice addition, a nice piece. He's an inline blocker. He's a lot. Hopefully, he's a better blocker than Smythe was. Smythe. But if you listen to Taron Armstead, he was on a podcast. I think it was a Dive Bar podcast, and they asked Taron Armstead, who is the best blocker other than O lineman that's on the team. He said Julian Hill. And he said, Julian Hill, this is his words, Julian Hill is going to have a breakout season. He's a hard worker, and he made some rookie mistakes last year. He was a little anxious, to get off the line and make that block. So he made some corrections towards the end of the year there. He did. He cleaned his act up a bit, and the organization has a lot of confidence in Julian Hill. So let's not count out Julian Hill along with Brown and John O. Smith. Then we also mentioned the wide receiver. I like the signing of Westbrook. I think Westbrook is an ideal third receiver. Now, how much is Mike McDaniel going to utilize him? As you said, Evan, I don't know. But I think he's a good addition. He's a very good blocker. He got 9 touchdowns. He got 9 touchdowns last year. So he's got to be he's going to be, or I think he's going to be, a very good red zone threat. We'll see. And then also the blocking for the running backs and all that kind of stuff. So let's go over. I got the list here. Basically of who we acquired. So this is the list of who we acquired. On defense, we acquired Mila-Fonwu. I know I butchered his name up. Ashton Davis, the safety. Cornerback, Artie Burns. Linebacker, KJ Britt. Those are the defensive additions. We resigned
Dotson. Now you can also mention that.
Yeah. I was going to say that we resigned Matt Dickerson, defensive tackle. We re-signed Neil Farrell, who is slotted as a nose tackle, and then of course we got Zach Sealer, and that's all the defensive tackles we have on this team, folks. That's it. And then, and as you said, Evan, we are waiting for Calais Campbell. So that's still up in the air on Calais Campbell. Is he coming back? Does he want to go play with a team that he feels is, and I'll just put it bluntly, a winner? Does he want to play for a winning team? Because at this point in time, the Miami Dolphins, in my opinion, this roster so far with the additions and who's on that roster, if you look at the depth and the roster they have now, is not as good as last year.
Yeah.
So, and now on the offense, the additions, as I said, Zach Wilson, wide receiver Westbrook, right? Nick Westbrook, running back Alexander Madison. Then we got the tight end Brown, as we were talking about, and then we got we added another Liam Eichenberg.
Ooh, yeah,
Larry Borum. We added him, and of course James Daniels, and then we've got a punter, Ryan Storehouse. So those are the folks that we've added. Well, what do you guys think about this? The running back that we acquired. I'll start with you, Sean. Alexander Madison. How do you feel? You think he's going to help us out, or what?
I have like I do for at least half of our free agent class. I have no opinion because I just don't think he's a relevant football player. I don't think he brings anything to the table for us. I know people said, he got 12 of 16 first downs in short yardage situations, but if you go watch the film, a big part of that was the offensive line in Las Vegas getting the push. I don't have an opinion on, and I can't force an opinion just because they joined my team. Like, they're just not good football players. And that's kind of how I feel about him and a few of the others. Like, I just don't see that he brings enough to where it's someone I need to really focus much energy on.
How about you, Curtis? How do you feel about the addition of Madison? What do you know? And do you know much about him? Have you?
Yeah,
have you
well, I watched him with the Vikings, and I thought he was good, but then I didn't realize he slipped a lot with the Raiders, and so my initial reaction was like, "Oh, I think he's like an above-average back." But if you look at the numbers, he was given a little bit less. I think he had yards before contact was 125 with Vikings, and then it fell to 1.10, which is a small drop. But his yards after contact went from 275 to 211. But the compounding problem was that he saw less 8-man in the box by 5%. So he saw thinner fronts. He got a little bit less yards before contact, but his numbers after the contact dropped dramatically. And so you don't know. You could say that, well, maybe he hit a wall, or he could have had some dings that slowed him down, but you never know. He had a lot of snaps, a lot of carries, and lifespan for a running back is 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. So I would say he's a guy, whatever you slice it, whether he is a running back that's not on the downside or had an off year, he's dependent on his offensive line. And our offensive line only gave 1.13 yards before contact between the tackles. And so he's going to be based on our run game. He can't hit the perimeter, so he's not going to be good in the outside zone. I'm not really big on Daniels and Brewer and Jackson, that side, and Eichenberg maybe, inside zone and digging guys out. So is he something? He's going to be based on the offensive line, but right now I'm not super confident on the offensive line. Although if Daniels is healthy, it's an uplift. But I'd still say Connor and Hunt were a much better combo than Brewer and
I agree.
Daniels.
Even if he is healthy, is it an uplift knowing that we're taking a huge downgrade from Armstead to Paul, most likely? To me, the offensive line is worse, even with the addition of James Daniels, simply because it's likely that Armstead is not going to be there, who is, if he had stayed healthy through his career, would probably be a borderline Hall of Famer. So just taking those massive steps down to Patrick Paul, I think we regressed on the offensive line.
I think I think there's two ways to look at it. I think right now I would agree, but if they can find a quality guy in the draft to play that left guard spot, Jones was so incongruent for our system. Eichenberg, Ikes. And if you pull both those guys out and you add Daniels and then maybe a good guy in the draft, even though Paul is a big step down from Tehran, not so much in the blocking, the run blocking in the inside zone, but blocking alone, a lot of stuff. I think it could balance it out because the interior with Eichenberg and Jones and in Brewer wasn't good. But if Daniels is healthy and you find a good left guard, it could lift up that interior running game and even more time to throw. So I agree I need to see who they're going to get because Greer might go get a guy in 4th round and totally suck. And Eichenberg could be left guard, and then you'd be totally 1,000% right.
I was going to say, I think we're at the point of the offseason where there's still a lot of room for hopium. I think Liam Eichenberg is your starting guard, and we just aren't going to admit it to ourselves until post-draft. But they're not known to value the guard position in the high rounds. I mean, they did it once with Rob Hunt, but I think based on the fact that they have restructured nobody to free up more money, that tells me they are just trying to plug holes with what they can, and they thought at least Liam's been in the system, and I think he's going to be the guy. I really do.
Well, we haven't, or at least I haven't checked. The last time I checked Spotrac, I didn't see any contract.
Exactly.
Numbers
it
for Liam Eichenberg.
They're hiding it because
if he's making more than $4 million or 3.5 or 4 million, he's our starter.
If he's making more than 1.2 million, they should fire him. Literally, honestly, at that point, if he's making any more than 1.2, they have him pegged as their starter. If they don't give him the minimum, the guy has not earned a contract the way he played.
Yep.
By the way, what confused me the most what shocked me the most wasn't that that Greer re-signed him. That was not what shocked me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that he wants to come back here. He can't be blinded by the fact that he's played all 5 positions. They use him as a marionette. Whenever someone can't play, they put him there. And when the moment Isaiah Wynn, don't be surprised if Isaiah Wynn gets re-signed. I'm waiting for that contract to come up. The moment Isaiah Wynn was back, they rotated him in and out. So they treat him like an abusive child. So I don't know why it's an abusive relationship, and I don't know why he came back.
Yeah.
I have no idea why he came back.
No one else would give him the money that he's going to get.
I think if he would have waited it out and there was an injury, someone would have signed him. As bad as Robert Jones was as bad as he was last year, the one thing about Liam Eichenberg that Robert Jones doesn't have, at least he's touched every single position on the line. So God forbid he could get a contract where even if he goes to the practice squad or whatever, he can earn his way back. Because remember, I laugh to this day when you look at the Commanders and you look at wait a second, that's Noah Igubenogany in a corner. That's Michael Dieter at center. Like players do get revamped in other places, right? Like I think for his own sanity, he had to try to go somewhere else. To come back here is like he's hurt. He's killing the fans and he's killing himself.
Well, Iggy, if you check out, I know a lot of folks are not high on PFF, but if you check out Iggy's PFF grades, they're not very good.
No.
Okay, so he didn't really make any revamp in his career.
But he did start for a team that was in the NFC Championship.
Exactly. He did. That I'll give him credit for
so
sure.
did Michael Dieter.
He didn't start though. He only had played like 2 or 3 games, I think.
Yeah.
But still,
he was a predominant snap getter for them late in the playoffs.
No, I think maybe I'll check.
I saw him a lot.
Yeah. All right. So so what you're saying is we still have what it looks like. What we're saying here is we got a lot of holes to fill. Well, still. So this is what we got so far. We've got 2 quarterbacks, 8 wide receivers, 3 running backs. If you include Ingold in that group, that's 4. I know he's a fullback. We got 5 tight ends on this roster, 8 tackles, 2 offensive linemen. I guess they're swing. I list Eichenberg in that group, that 2, and Borum. Then we've got 2 centers, 1 freaking guard on this roster, legit guard, other than it is James Daniels. And then we've got 2 punters. Yay. We've got 1 kicker. Now that's your offense. On defense, we've got 5 safeties, 9 cornerbacks, 8 linebackers, 6 edge, and 3 defensive tackles and 1 pending, and that's Calais Campbell. So out of that group that I just mentioned, who are we going to go for in the draft? What are we going to draft at 13?
Right now, I think you have to draft defensive tackle because people can say Calais Campbell's name all they want and wish it into existence, but there's really no reason other than he's just not ready to retire and he loved staying home. There's just no logical or rational reason for Calais Campbell to come back to the Miami Dolphins. That is not something I'm banking on personally. So I think you've pigeonholed yourself into defensive tackle because you have nothing besides Max Sealer.
At 13?
13, 48, that you're going to need to come away with at least 2 of them unless I'm sure at some point they might go the Benito Jones route or something like that. But to me, that's just more Band-Aids for a roster that's just absolutely full of Band-Aids.
Yeah, it's crazy because last year we were talking about a bunch of tackles. Remember they brought in a bunch of defensive tackles last year? They had like 7 or 8 defensive tackles at this time.
They all came from the minimum. They all got $2 million.
Yeah, they did.
They're all re-signing. Neville Gallimore just signed. They're all re-signing. They're all re-signing, popping up everywhere else though now.
Yeah. Curtis, what do you think we're going to go at 13? Out of everything that I just mentioned, that group, what do you think we're going to go for in the draft?
Well,
or Greer, not me. Greer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Greer. Well, the thing is, we don't know who's going to fall. Like, so Sean was saying a D tackle. Well, if Mason Graham falls, then I think that's the case. I really like Grant, although his 22 rep bench kind of concerns me a little bit, but I don't think Greer's going to go for that. He passed on Vita Vea. They passed on the franchise passed on the God. We passed on Lawrence. I don't think we're going to go there. I think if I know Greer, he's going to go defensive back. I think they're going to. I'm not saying it's the right move for me. If Membo was there, I would take Membo. If Mason Graham was there, I believe in trenches first. I just don't think that the talent will be there. I think that they'll probably go maybe, was it not Will Campbell? What's the guy? It was Will Johnson or Starks. He cut Fuller, and either he could be. I think Greer might be totally insane. He might think that Cam Smith is ready for a breakout and take over that cornerback position. I think that would, I think it would be very Greer, but also totally insane. But I would say, knowing Greer, he does not value. I can't remember who said that. My memory's not so great, but he doesn't value guards. I don't really see him going offensive line unless it's Membo. I don't think the talent's there for the D line. Trade back would be the best. Although if we trade back, that gives Greer more ammo shots in the mid rounds, and he is a disaster in the mid rounds. A good GM, that would be a good move. With Greer, though, it could just be more blanks to fire. So I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, you said who was the guy that you said had 22 reps in the bench press?
Grant. He's the big.
Grant.
I really like him at the DT, the nose tackle.
Liam Eichenberg had 33 reps, right?
Yeah. No, but
he's all top heavy, man.
Yeah,
he has no legs, no hips, no leg, nothing, man.
No, but the thing is, I love the nose tackles. And if you look at Will Fork, you look at Nagata, you look at Lawrence, you look at Vita Vea, all those super elites, they all had.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he's not. I was shocked. I mean, I played at 185 and I benched 225 16 times. I don't understand how a guy 320 only does it. Maybe whatever. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but it was a little bit of a little concern.
Yeah, for a man that size, that's pretty weak, to be honest with you. It really is. And it being an athlete and a man that size, it's pretty weak. It really is. Evan, how about you? Where do you think we're going in the draft?
Okay. I think we should always go BPA, but that's what Greer does. Like, I don't care if it's McMillan. I don't care if it's Banks. I don't care who it is that's there at 13. If it's the best player available on your board, take him. But the way that McDaniel was an offensive-minded coach, what did he say in his first interview of the draft? If I could, my first pick in every draft, if it's the player I like, I'm going to take an edge rusher. So I can. The only two things, and what does Greer do? Greer likes his shiny as best as he can, corners. So I'm convinced it's either going to be a corner or it's going to be an edge. I wouldn't be upset if it was a linebacker, because I think I'm not comfortable with the linebacker core in coverage. Oy vey, I don't trust it. But at the same time, I'm convinced we're going to hear edge rusher or we're going to hear corner. And the thing about those two picks is I'd be fine with those two picks if we were picking where we were picking last year. At 13, you're low enough that you should take the best player on that board. I don't care if he's a tackle, a guard, a lineman, a safety. I don't care what he is. You take the best.
What if he's a quarterback?
I would take him too. I'd take him too.
Shakir Sanders?
No, I wouldn't take Shador. Shador Sanders is not a first-round pick. This is one of the weakest.
I don't know. Mel
Drafts.
Kiper has Jackson Dart in his top 10 now as of today. So
yeah.
Wow.
Well, for me, the whole Tua thing, I'm over it. I was part of Tua in the first year because I'm going to support my quarterback, but the guy doesn't learn his lesson. So why should I forgive him for that? But no, I'm saying, I don't care who it is. Like, for me right now, we just signed. If McMillan is sitting there at 13, I don't care who it is. I'm taking that wide receiver, because in a year from now, you're going to get rid of Tyreek. You're going to need that wide receiver. So for me, I don't care. Get the best player available on the draft. Like, honestly, I would trust Pro Football Network's mock draft than I would trust Chris Greer. Like, I don't trust him to pick. I don't trust him to save his life. I don't trust him. Neither McDaniel.
I fully have the draft philosophy. You draft the best player available, regardless of position. And if you did that, which we don't, so don't let Chris Greer fool you when he says we draft the best player available. You never draft the best player available. If you did, you would have drafted at least one star player in your entire tenure as a GM, and he hasn't. Maybe he's signed some solid players, some good players. He hasn't drafted one star player his entire time, unless you want to count Xavier Howard.
2016 was his best draft, and he wasn't even really the GM. Like his first year,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, his first year, which he wasn't even actually the GM because he had someone above him, was his sort of his best. But he was in charge of the draft. That was probably his best draft. It was his first year, really like in that role. So for me, I don't care who it is. Like if Cam Ward fell to 13, I couldn't care. Bring in the best people, and then you'll fill the needs elsewhere. Like honestly,
and I think in this draft you could do both. I think the draft board is kind of set up that way. Whereas, sure, we signed 2 upside backup-ish safeties, but there's a guy whose scouting report, anywhere you look, pretty much starts with never before seen physical specimen, whatever. And Nick Emmanwari, I would draft him at 13, and then I don't know if he'll be there because I think because it's not a top-heavy draft, you'll see some guys go earlier than expected. But Alfred Collins at defensive tackle in the second, both of those to me would be best player available who also happen to fit a need. But knowing us, we're going to draft like the one guy none of us talk about.
Yeah, more like
Patrick.
Hey, Sean, I got to give you a compliment, dude. I can't pronounce my kids' names, much less some of these football player names, man. You've nailed 2 of the hardest ones, man. That's amazing, dude.
How long, Curtis, did it take you to say Tua Tagovailoa? How long did it take you to
I don't say it now. What are you talking about? I just say Tua.
Well, it's probably better that you don't anyway.
I can't spell it. I can say it. I can spell it, but I can't spell it.
Oh, dude, I'm a New Yorker, man. I can't pronounce nothing.
I'm Canadian. My language is completely different than yours. It's all good.
So do you think we're going to take a quarterback in this year's draft?
No,
because we got Zach Wilson, and
if they had signed a backup, like a veteran backup, like a Marcus Mariota, which I would have hated, then I could have seen us taking one in the mid rounds, like the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Since they took an upside guy, I doubt that they would take one.
As long as Tua is your quarterback, they'll never hurt his feelings.
Yeah. Well,
never hurt his feelings.
So how do you guys feel about Zach Wilson? Evan, how do you feel about Zach Wilson?
I'm fine with Zach Wilson because it doesn't matter who's at quarterback until Mike McDaniel finds a scheme, because it took him, how many times did it take him? It was until that Cleveland game where everyone was all high on Tyler Huntley. How many games did it take him? He's averaging 10 points when Tua was out of the lineup. When Teddy Bridgewater was in, he did the best he could. But anytime Tua is out, Mike McDaniel doesn't know what to do with his playbook. He gets lost. He's confused. He goes back to these simple checkdowns. We should average 10. Last year, we averaged 10 points a game when Tua was out of the lineup. So until Mike, it doesn't matter who you sign. You can go sign Cam Ward. You could draft Cam Ward. You can draft Shedeur Sanders. You can Mike McDaniel, the way he calls games, would ruin Patrick Mahomes' career. That's how poorly of a play caller he is. Like, if you do what he tells you to, it's unbelievable. Like, how he can't get a play in. When's the last time you saw a quarterback on the Miami Dolphins call an audible? Like, at the line of scrimmage. Read the defense. Look at the safeties coverage. Because I know, Sean, you follow Brett, and I do this with Brett and Greg on overtime. The eyes of the quarterback and the eyes of the defense shouldn't be on what the defensive lineman's doing. They're looking at what the safeties are doing and what the coverage is at the back. Tua doesn't do that. Tua's listening to his earpiece. That's the problem. So it doesn't matter who you bring in. Zach Wilson, for me, at least he can move outside the pocket. He's trying to resurrect his career. If he gets the chance to come in, he gives you either a disaster. He'll either make things worse or he'll make things better. If you bring in a conservative quarterback, it's not going to work with Mike McDaniel, because Mike McDaniel will basically pigeonhole them. At least with him, Zach Wilson being here early at camp, he's still young. He still wants to prove himself. He probably has that resurrection of a Sam Darnold in his mind, where he has a chance to maybe get his one-time contract. He's here because he thinks he'll have a chance to play, which he likely will play, because Tua is going to be a moron. But at the same time, for me, I'm okay with it. I don't want a Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew has been everywhere. He's not going to play. I don't really need Joe Flacco as a statue. That's not going to work with our offensive line. The way so for me, I'm okay with Zach Wilson because it's at least a young, motivated person who's been kicked in the teeth. And he has like if you go to New York, it's not like Mike White, who was a backup. At least this guy was drafted high. He can walk into that room and laugh at us saying, I was drafted higher than you. Like, honestly, for me, I'm okay with Zach Wilson. It's the least of my worries, the backup quarterback, because even if you bring in anybody, as long as Tua is a moron and Mike McDaniel continues to play call the way he play calls, it drives me crazy. Look at Jalen Wright. They moved up to draft Jalen Wright. You never saw him. You never saw him. Why do you draft a guy and you move up in the draft? You're all excited in the draft, the war room, that you drafted this kid and you don't use him. You're trying to put Devon Achane up between the tackles. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So for me, it doesn't matter. I'm okay with Zach Wilson because at least it creates fodder. I like a young person who's been kicked in the teeth. It's like when you fire a head coach. Like I'm waiting for Brian Flores to get rehired, because when he gets rehired, he's going to dominate. Like, people who get fired first. Like, I think Mike McDaniel will be an excellent second-time head coach. Not now. He was the perfect head coach when Flores was hired. He's not the right coach for this team. So for me, I'm fine with Zach Wilson. Let Tua feel a little bit of pressure. Let him feel.
Can you imagine if he goes into training camp and looks really good?
Yeah.
And we get into the some part of the season where Tua is not playing well.
Yeah.
It is going to be some interesting discourse on X.
Wow, yeah, I didn't even think of that. We might have a little
because the kid does have
on.
Talent. It's just raw talent. The issue he has is in between the ears. It's not in physical talent.
Yeah. But look at New York quarterbacks, right? Before Curtis goes, look at when's the last time a successful quarterback, they gave Justin Fields $10 to $20 million a year, and Justin Fields was a bust in Chicago and lost his job to Russell Wilson, who put $40 million of dead cap on the Broncos, and the Broncos made the playoffs. So for me, like anyone who goes to the Jets to be quarterback goes there to die. So anyone who has a chance to go somewhere else to resurrect their career, and you want to know what? I don't care if he was in that room listening to Sean Payton. That's learning something. You want to know what? Let's see what he learned. Let's see what he learned. He didn't create problems in Denver. He was quiet. So let us see what he can do here. Let's see. Darnold was quiet. Darnold moved around, did what he had to do. Baker Mayfield did the same thing, bounced around. Let's see. Let's see what happens.
And just a heads up, Zach Wilson was third string quarterback in Denver.
Doesn't matter.
Just saying.
So was Josh Dobbs. So was Josh Dobbs in San Francisco. And now they've drafted. They put the Patriots signed him because. And where's Joe Milton now? Joe Milton's the 3.
I think they're getting ready to trade him, right?
Yeah, they're probably they're trying to find a trade.
He's on the trade block here.
So a lot of just because you're a third quarterback doesn't prove nothing, right? It doesn't mean anything. There's depth for a reason, right? At one point, Sam Darnold was a third. At one point, Carolina was the third stringer there.
It doesn't even matter if you're the 4th or 5th in Miami. You're probably going to play at some point.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's a good point. Good point, Sean. So, Curtis, how about you? How are you feeling about Zach Wilson? And do you think that he was the best backup quarterback that we could have picked up, or do you think it was somebody else we could have gotten and would have been a better fit for this offense?
I was a little interested in Cooper Rush, but I think the biggest problem for me is that you could see with Mahomes, one of the best, no time, pressure, a poor offensive line, no run game, and he folds like a cheap lawn chair. So my belief is always that the offensive line makes the NFL world go round, and trench play, it doesn't have to be top 5, top 10, but it's got to be at a level of coherency. Mm-hmm. And so you got a guy like Wilson who, to be fair to what everybody's saying is that if you go back, that McDaniel runs Shanahan principles, the old Shanahan system. You look at Elway, you look at Jake the Snake Plumber, that mobility and getting a mobile platform definitely helps a poor offensive line. I don't know why they didn't do more with Mahomes. You saw Andy Reid try it, and they started getting some action late in the second half in that Super Bowl. But the problem is, the main problem is that, as it's been said, that McDaniel is overloaded. he struggles to get his system out there. And I don't think it's all his fault. If you got a run game coordinated, you'd want to have an offensive line that can be balanced and run the football because that would be his strength. But we decided to come out and run the 80s Dolphins with a quarterback who's not Dan Marino. And so for me, this offensive line, I think it will be better, but it's going to not be good enough in what we need. And that's the A and B gap runs. And so a poor processor like Wilson, even though he has the mobility, he can maybe make things, but there's not going to be consistency. And so if you get off track and you have an offensive line that's not threatening A and B gap, the linebacker is going to sit at high leverage. They're going to be aiming for the side, the screens, the edge runs, and the flares, and then they're also going to be dropping back for the pocket post and playing the cover two. And it's going to put all the quarterbacks in a non-conducive environment. And so my concern is that this offensive line, this trench play, and now it looks like on both sides of the ball, is going to be substandard. We are in pass balance era cycle that I've been talking about for a few years, where you've got to control the A and B gap at some points. It's how you win in the bad weather and on the road. And we don't have that right now. Brewer is light in the pants. Daniels can move, but he's not a mover. Jackson can't move anybody. Paul kind of can. We don't know. I hate to say it. I kind of believe Eichenberg is going to be the guard, but I got to wait to see. So I don't look like a jackass, but I throw it out there. But if he's there, we're screwed. And so I don't think it's going to matter. I think that McDaniel, it's the same thing with Flores. We screw everybody over. Greer and leadership screws. How do you get a run game coordinator who's in the booth and then make him come down and make him call BHC and then make him win immediately and don't give him an offensive line? This is somebody who's definitely high as a kite. And I think this was all about loading up to get ticket prices up. They wanted increased ticket prices in 23. They get all the Flores got dead bodies in the basement. Mike McDaniel's the nicest guy in the universe. And look what we could do with the offense. If Tua just stays healthy, give me money. And so now they got their pants down and everybody's getting screwed except for Greer. I think he's going to be back for 2 more years at least. I hope not. So yeah, I don't know. I like Wilson, but not really. He can't process. You need a guy who processes quickly or releases quickly, and he doesn't do both. But why not? Why not, right?
Well, who would have been better? Who would have been better than Wilson, do you think? You said Cooper Rush.
Just sort of, because I think it was Cooper Rush last year. I think it was Cooper Rush had 2.17 clean throw time, which was the second fastest, which is 1/6 of a second slower than us, which is crazy. And so I kind of liked it, but we're in such a pigeonholed system because of what we build here. We don't have audibles. We've got to rely on this cheat motion, which is no longer cheating and nobody cares. And we can't run the football in the interior. And so I thought Cooper Rush would have been a good thing because he had the experience of having to throw fast with the Cowboys. So, but we're screwed because it was so pigeonholed. We have such a tight menu and teams have us pegged. So that's my take.
If you had said Cooper Rush before free agency started, I would have said that's a good name. That's probably the best resume. That's realistic. Like, we're not going to add Russell Wilson. Obviously, he'd probably be the best backup that you could go get. But once I started to see what we were doing in free agency, I just don't think the backup matters in the sense that I just don't. We have such a low ceiling, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We're not
100%.
doing. I don't see a playoff team as of right now. So
no,
much less making any kind of damage in the playoffs. So I would rather get the one that might be upside. And then you get lucky, and if he hits, right, then you have something intriguing to work with potentially.
The thing, Sean, for me is though, I think that every year we exist on hopium. It's our year. It's our year. It's our year. To me, success this season is coherency. Just learn to get physical, learn to play on the road. Learn to not wet your pants in the big moments. Show yourself to be a little bit of a big boy. And if you could do that, it would be some success. And
I
I'm
get
not
what you're
saying,
saying.
I'm sorry, Sean, keep going, brother.
No, you're fine. I cut you off.
No. Finish up. It's okay. You got the general flow.
I was gonna say, like, I get what you're saying, but to me, like, that's stuff I want to see in year one, not year three. Not like I refuse to move the goalposts backwards just because they haven't met the realistic ones that have been out there. And look, I thought heading into the 2023 season, we had arguably the best roster in the NFL on paper. And I also knew that there was not going to be another season after 2023 where I would be able to say that because, like, such as the life cycle of the NFL, you're going to have to sign some of these young guys. You're going to have to pay your quarterback. You're going to have to pay this, that, and the other. So, like, I thought 2023 was our best shot. It hasn't worked out. And they just keep kind of doubling down and doubling down and doubling down while regressing and regressing and regressing. And I just think for me, like this season, to me, it's almost like, and it's crazy to say because we have so much more talent than this, but it's almost like 2019 again, like where it's like I kind of want to see Josh Rosen instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick just because I want to see what's there. For me, it's like I'd rather see Zach Wilson to see if there's something there than watch Tua do the same Tua stuff all the time.
Well, I think we're going to get that opportunity this year. So
yeah, I just want. Can I add to that just a second, there,
yeah,
Steve?
Go ahead, Curtis.
So my personal Curtis GM Curtis owner would have fired Greer a long time ago. I would have fired him in 2021. I don't think that McDaniel is the guy now. I think that you can't lose control of the locker room the way. But what I'm trying to do is just evaluate within the moment, and there's no way that that we can succeed. Like you said, there's no Super Bowl, there's no big playoff thing or whatever. But my fear is that Ross is old. He's not going to get premium GM or premium coach. The guy's going to be 86. I think he's going to run with this team for 2 more seasons. And so I'm just trying to lay out the dual track that if we're stuck with these guys for 2 years, 11, I don't think Greer, it's 10th year. I hear people saying that, but I've been saying for a while, maybe 10th year is the charm. I don't think so. But if you somehow, by some miracle, the power of the stars come down and these guys have an epiphany of like biblical proportions, simply getting foundational principles and coherency and consistency and toughness. If that were to happen, it would be more impressive to me than getting to the postseason and having a playoff win, because I didn't think we would do anything in 23. I didn't think we would do anything in 22 either. I said maybe there's a long shot possibility because there were core principles, core setups, core foundational concepts that were lacking. And the flashy talent really didn't have me. It's about going into the phone booth, beating the hell out of somebody in key moments. That's how you win in the NFL. And all the finesse and, the emotional, that stuff is just going to beat weak, average, and maybe above average teams. But it's a house of cards in the big game. So I totally am on your side. I totally agree. But for me, more important than the wins is this physicality, this phone booth success. It's always been my evaluation, not saying it's right. So I just wanted to, throw it out there.
No, it is right. And I think my biggest problem with the Dolphins and why I'm not having fun and I'm not really fanning over them. It's more like, even if I try to care about another team, I can't. That's just not how it works. Like, we all understand how fandom works. But I'm not a fan of literally any player on this team. I'm not a fan of any of the coaches, any of the GMs, the owner. Like, I'm just a fan because I was a fan since 5 years old, and I don't have a choice in the matter. But and a big reason for that is because I'm like you. I fundamentally disagree with the philosophy of how this team is built, of how it's designed. I hate the scheme on offense. Like, we don't like to hit. That's so weird to me. We're a pro football team that doesn't like tackle. To hit.
We can't
we
tackle.
don't hit.
Don't tackle.
It's just, it's bizarre to me. And we don't hit on. We definitely don't hit on offense.
My man.
It's just. I get where you're coming from, And that's why I think for me, I've gotten to the point where I'm so checked out because I'm just waiting for the next group, because I think the stupid thing they did that kind of screwed themselves is they thought, for whatever reason, maybe it was out of arrogance, maybe it's because they got the fan base hyped for the first time in a long time, that this weird idea of being the number one offense, even though they were absolutely terrible against every good defense. In 2023, they decided to double down in a way that successful NFL franchises don't do. You didn't see the Rams go and overpay their roster immediately following winning a Super Bowl, yet we went and overpaid our roster following a disappointing first round exit against the Chiefs. And some of those guys had no business getting new contracts, and Ramsey had just gotten one. The only one I really, to me, was justified was Waddle, and I have a problem with Waddle too. I haven't seen him show up really in 2 years. Like, maybe the stats were there in 2023, but he hasn't made an impact play in just about 2 years.
Yeah,
you're
of
right.
Games against the Jets, he's been pretty irrelevant for someone who's making almost $30 million.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the thing that I have a big beef with is I don't think we're going to go anywhere no matter how much talent we acquire. Sure, we'll beat the bad teams and stuff like that, but we come up against physical, good defenses. The problem is we've got a culture problem in Miami. We've got a big culture problem in Miami, and that's my beef. If we don't change this culture, and it's not going to be with McDaniel because he's not changing.
He's a social worker.
he is. That's what I call him. He's a social worker. And it's not going to change until we change the culture, until Chris Greer is gone. I'm with you guys. I just don't see this team going anywhere. I mean, everybody's, talking about, Greer's cooking, man. Look, he's getting all these valued players and all this kind of stuff. Hey, don't you realize he's the one that put us in this position? He's the one that's overpaid for players. That's the reason why we're in this freaking position that we are now. That's why he has to go to freaking Kmart to shop for players.
The one thing, my one pushback on I do agree the culture is absolute trash in Miami. The part I would disagree on, and credit to Lewis, who I saw was in the chat, my guy, earlier. When do we start holding the players accountable for the culture? When does I watched 20 years of Tom Brady getting in people's asses on the sideline, in the locker room. I saw Peyton Manning be the general of his football team. Like, at what point does our quarterback hold some of the responsibility for setting the tone and setting the culture on the field, in the locker room? Like, he's getting paid $200-something million, and I don't think he's
show me the money, baby.
I don't think he's ever held anybody accountable a day in his life. Tyreek Hill, what kind of example are you setting for the young guys like Malik or Taj Washington when you walk off the field and all the stupid shit you say every other week? When are we going to get players in here that can also set a culture? If you go to Pittsburgh, right, like Mike Tomlin, we can all say he sets the culture and stuff. I didn't see him overly manage George Pickens' issues, but he doesn't need to, because he has guys like TJ Watt, guys like Hayward in the locker room, who a kid like Pickens is just not gonna open his mouth to. Like, they run that locker room. Like, so while I do agree that Greer and McDaniel need a better culture, I think a big part of that has to start with the players too.
But that's where Greer has to add that kind of, it's like they
for sure.
They are so post-Bullygate. They want the nice guys, the athletic guys, the smart guys.
They play like it. Yeah, and they play like it.
But there's one player who doesn't.
Like the nice guys.
There's one player who doesn't, so I want to give him his flowers. So every game I watch one player. It doesn't matter if we're losing by 20, we're up by 20, doesn't matter. The one player Greer lucked out on, who is I think he's the greatest bargain in the NFL right now, is Zach Sealer.
Yeah,
if we had 53 Zach Sealers, this team would be a championship team. He's a quiet leader, because I don't think he's loud in the locker room. I think he should have the opportunity to do it. He should be a captain. But if we had 50, he's the one player on this team. I don't care who it is, the one player identified on this team who never quits, who's been with this team since the beginning, was a 7th-round pick, was a nobody, was living in an RV for 2 years, got his big money payday, deserves way more than he's getting paid. Everyone said his talent was because of Christian Wilkins. He had a better year last year than he did with Christian Wilkins the year before. If we had 53 Zach Sealers, we'd be a different kind of football team. That's who the person that should be the leader of this football team. If everyone should stare at Zach Sealer and go, I should be playing like that guy.
100%.
I agree. I just think when you look at the successful teams in the NFL, it's the quarterback.
Of course,
even Jalen Hurts isn't the best quarterback in the world. That's still Jalen Hurts' team, and he handles himself like it's his team. Matt Stafford handles the Rams like it's his team. Aaron Rodgers always handled the Packers like it's his team. And even Jared Goff, to an extent, manages the Lions like it's his team. Tua just doesn't do that.
Yeah, and he's not going to.
No, that's not who he is. That's not who he is.
Not how he's built.
Not who he is. Just the way he is, man.
Brock Purdy doesn't do that. Justin Herbert doesn't necessarily do that. And Trevor Lawrence doesn't necessarily do that. And you see that's why they are where they're at.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I got a question here. It was put up in the chat by Anthony Masano and Shake Money. They had a question. They said, who would be a better play caller if it came to that? Frank Smith or Darrell Bevell? I'll start with you, Evan. Who would you think would be the better play caller?
Neither, because one hasn't called in 10 years.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you. No, I would. If I had to choose one, I would tell you. But on this roster right now, just because it's recency bias, and because he had success 2 years with C.J. Stroud, I would give it to Bobby Slowick. Because at least he's been an offensive coordinator, unlike Mike McDaniel, who was an offensive coordinator, but the run game coordinator in San Francisco. He's never actually been a play caller before he got to Miami.
True.
Darrell Bevell has not done that job, and no matter what I say, he was the offensive coordinator that made the worst play call in Super Bowl history. So I'm not giving him play call. And for me, I'm not giving it to Frank Smith because I don't know what Frank Smith does. So until I know exactly what Frank Smith has been doing for the last 3 years, I'm not giving it to him. So
hey, Devin, I don't know what any of these freaking coaches do, to be honest with you.
So I honestly, if I had to give it to somebody, because now he's actually a senior pass game coordinator, I would actually give it to Bobby Slowick because it's recency bias. He's actually play called in the system for the last couple seasons. He's young. He's motivated. That's who I would give it to on this roster. If I had to do an order, I'd give it to Bevell over Smith. But then why do you have Frank Smith? That's my point. So in the end, if I had to give it to anybody on the roster or on the coaching staff, it would be Bobby Slowick. And I would demote. I would actually make him the assistant head coach. I have no idea why John Embry, when the tight end room before Jonnu Smith was absolute garbage, why he is the de facto associate head coach, because he has proven nothing to me when he is with the tight end room, because he didn't develop. Jonnu Smith did not develop because of John Embry.
No,
so I'd give it to Bobby Slowick.
I agree. And before I move on, I just want to thank everybody that's in the chat making all the comments, man. I really appreciate that. Make sure you hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, I've seen a lot of new folks in the chat. Please hit that subscribe button and then share with everybody, friends, families, neighbors, any of the other fans teams. Just share with everybody. I'd appreciate that. Curtis, what do you think about the question? Who would it be for you, Bevell or Frank Smith, if it came down to that?
Frank Smith was arguing with our offensive line coordinator in 2022 for Eichenberg over Jones. So that immediately dismisses him. And then notice how that offensive line coach was fired and then Eichenberg was starting. And so, no, Frank Smith, he just seems like a disingenuous guy. He doesn't seem there's something about him that gives me the skin crawls. And that was like a river too far to cross, a bridge too far, whatever it is. Too much for him to support Eichenberg over Jones. I would put anybody in there. I would put, my grandmother in over Frank Smith just because I really don't like him. I mean, Bevell, he's done some things with Tua. He had a lot of success with Seattle. Slowick, there's some things I didn't like. I remember, it's so funny. I remember the beginning of last year, I was watching the Texans game, And I'm like, this guy's getting blitzed out of like his gourd, and I'm not seeing any screens and play actions. He's just doing 7-step drops and having this. I said, what's wrong with this?
That line was garbage, though. Their line was garbage.
Yeah, but you still gotta compensate somehow, you know. And he was just like, screw it, man, like Chuck and Duck, baby. And he was just getting killed. I'm like, this guy is an idiot. And lo and behold, then we sign him. So,
but I think, but it's a second job. But it's like I told you, when someone gets fired the first time, you try to prove something. And honestly, I think for him, if he had Waddle and Hill, I think he would find a way to utilize them the way McDaniel can't.
He might. Anybody but Frank Smith. Anybody but Frank Smith.
Gotcha. Sean, how about you? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm in the camp that I don't think a single human being on planet Earth has ever seen Frank Smith call a play. So it's hard to judge what you would do.
Yeah,
I'm not a big Darrell Bevel guy simply because I'm not buying the hype that he's done all this stuff with Tua, or that Mike McDaniel has either. Because I think all Tua has done is take the natural progression of a decently talented player who was picked 5th overall.
Yep.
And with a system that works in his favor around him. I don't know that anyone unlocked anything in Tua. Tua just took the natural progression that he should have. I think Mike McDaniel should call the plays. And I also think that some of the problem, not all of it, because there's plenty of times where he frustrates me with his play calls, especially when he throws goal line fades to 5'9" wide receivers. But I think a big part of my issue with the play calling too is we always look disorganized. We always have pre-snap issues. We always have communication issues, and that kind of goes not with play calling, but with practicing. And as we all know, that we're not practicing well because we found that out at the end of the season. It's a country club, so I don't know. Like McDaniel's going to go down with a ship, and if he can't play call, what can he do at this point? Like, why take it away from him? Like, if he can't play call, what is he bringing to the table?
100%, and that's what I've always said. That's his identity, his play calling. If he loses that, he has nothing.
Become a head coach. Become a head coach.
He is a head coach.
No,
he's not head coach.
He's not a head coach. He's the offensive core. We don't have a head coach. The closest thing we have to a head coach.
I know, but his title is head coach.
No, but I know his title is head coach, but that's been the problem. He's not a head coach.
I agree. I'm off.
When you look at that sideline, if you never watched football before, and you took people who know nothing about football, and they stood on the sideline, and they stood on the sideline, and you put Anthony Weaver and Mike McDaniel standing side by side next to each other with headsets on, holding play call sheets, and you said, who is the leader of men of this football team? No one would choose Mike McDaniel.
Unless they looked at his sneakers. Those are very nice looking sneakers.
You just actually picked the answer. The answer is make Anthony Weaver the offensive play caller, because at least he knows how to stop the offense. He does it every day. Just call the opposite of what stops it. And it's probably going to be about the same production to what did we average last year? Like 12 to 15 points per game?
Yeah, something like
that. Can't be much worse.
But
it was big step down.
In the end, they're going to have to work with what they have. They have to do well in the draft. But in the end, it's up to Tua, Waddle, and Hill, and it's up. In the end, it's in the quarterback's hands. Is he going to learn from his mistakes and stay healthy? And are they? Because I don't want to ever hear one more pundit say they can't solve the two safeties deep. Do you know how many defenses play two safeties deep? Like, are you kidding me? Everyone finds a way to solve that problem. You have that wide receiver in the NFL.
I don't think the issue is the two safeties deep. It is, in a sense. I think the problem is, and again, I think a lot will realize, and some people, won't want to hear it. Others are coming to accept it, but it stems from the quarterback, right? We have a timing-based offense where Tua has to operate fast. He needs to anticipate. He needs to throw to a spot, anticipating the wide receiver is going to be there. The problem is we have a bunch of 6 foot and under wide receivers who, if they get jammed at the line and thrown off their route or off timing, the pass is off. So I do think two safeties deep is a problem-ish. I think, again, what I said earlier, the personnel, the philosophy of how you built this is the problem more so than the safeties, in the sense that you have guys that can easily get jammed up. You have a quarterback that can't extend plays, so he has to get the ball out in this fast window. And then on top of that, we stopped being able to run the football last year.
Yeah,
So
those
you're
are
not
all
giving
great points.
defenses other things to defend.
Yeah, I like to pick it. For me, the safety deep thing is not its combination. If you go and watch the play calls from 2 years ago against Denver, we had that big game with 70 points or whatever. But if you'll notice, you start tracking what the defenses began doing after that. They started lengthening their edge players because we would crack them down when they were too tight. And by lengthening those edge players, you started to put an emphasis on attacking the screen game, which only started to build in the 23 season. But it took care of, and it allowed the guys to get to the edge as far as the outside runs. But then they started dropping linebackers back to 5 and 6 yards. And then they started not blitzing. And then they'd stop. All they did was read and react at the linebacker position. And that allowed them to get outside the scrum, attack the edges, attack the screens, but then also drop into that pocket post. And essentially the defenses used this book. I've said it before that in Dallas game 2 years ago, they played dime in the red zone with 4 yards to go. That's unheard of. And so they vacated the A and B gap. And when you cannot run and take advantage of that, you don't get blitzes, you lose leverage. Their defenses play over leverage, they play drop, they play read and react, and you're done because then you add in the penalties. And so they just said, okay, we're going to make you march down the field. You're going to screw up, get off schedule, get a penalty. You'll be in 3rd and long, and you're not going to be able to get us because we're going to rush 4 and drop 7. And so I think what Sean was saying, it's the run game. The run game is the number one way to break this because then you force linebacker leverage up, you force blitzes, you force safeties to compress, and it changes everything. You have to have a defense off balance. As an offense, you have to have initiative. If the defense has initiative, then you're reacting, and they've got to react. That's what a defense does. Defense means react. And so everything gets flipped because they say, screw you. You can't run the ball. We're putting 2 DIs inside. We're playing total shell around it. Run us out of it. And if not, you're going to throw in a non-conducive environment and in the process totally screw up. And so I don't think anybody could get through that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for your service, Steve.
No,
Yes,
he
sir.
said he smelled ex-military. Yeah. So what was I going to say now? Yeah, that's a great point. You guys are making some great points, but I also think I know what else would help is, of course, the inside zone run game would help as well. But nobody's as scared of Tua taking off and running either, or going off script. You know what I mean? Or rolling out and making a pass. That plays a lot into it too, in my opinion. So anyway,
I think it plays the most part because like the game that really did it for me wasn't even last year. It was the year before when we played the Titans, and Mike Vrabel essentially left Jalen Waddle uncovered most of the game. Just didn't even have another cornerback on him. Had the cornerback in playing linebacker, and Tua just continually forced balls to Tyreek Hill with Jalen Waddle open the entire game. I just think it's. And look, when you have to run an offense that's gotten so complex as ours, to where we're doing all these cheat motions, all these things that are results and pre-snap penalties and complications and stuff, like that's when you know, like, you're trying to cover up all these deficiencies in your quarterback that in a modern NFL, it just doesn't work. Like, one of the big takeaways people had with Jalen Hurts winning the Super Bowl was that, oh, I guess you don't need to have one of these elite players at quarterback to win a Super Bowl. No, that wasn't what you were supposed to take away. What you take away is they had a guy who was a playmaker at quarterback, because what he did was run for 80-something yards in critical moments and didn't have to throw the ball all over the field. The modern NFL, like the top 6 teams all have quarterbacks that can make plays off script. And instead, we've gotten so complicated with how we've designed our offense because ours can't even hold on to the ball past 2.5 seconds without falling apart. It's just we're such a limited offense that I think there's things like you could run the ball and that's going to help a little bit. You could do this and it'll help a little bit, but ultimately, I just think we're so limited with
Well,
what our potential is.
I think, Sean, I think you're right, but it goes back again to Chris Greer. So if you have a quarterback that has trouble throwing the outs, has an injury history, is not highly mobile, why would you design this system? You should have designed a 2 tight end inside run game where you can use the quick release to play off it, where he is not the end all be all. He's a piece of the puzzle. You got receivers who can block. But we decided to take him and say, be Dan Marino, when he should have been a Bob Greasy style guy, should have built around him, starting with the core. But I think Stephen Ross has this fantasy because he tried to do the same thing with Tannehill. Try to make this 1980s Dan Marino high-flying offense, and Dan even couldn't run it because he didn't have an incomplete offense. So I just think from the very beginning we built poorly. We could have drafted better, but you got the guy here. This is not the offense for him. It's not really the offense for anybody. Who could really thrive in this? I mean, maybe Allen or something, to pick up the yards on the ground. But you could see even over the last couple of years, he couldn't go anywhere, really. He got ground up. This was just a guy who's totally delusional, that overinflated his ego, overinflated his process, and overinflated
That's the question, the one you just passed by. And that was going to be my answer. The issue wasn't like building. The question is, why did you pay him $200 million after getting to see him for 4 years?
Like
whoever said that comment, yeah.
Yeah. DSG is great about that. No, my concern right now actually is, like, if I'm the 49ers, if they give Brock Purdy $50 million, they're nuts.
Yeah.
They're nuts.
They're going to, but yeah,
they're crazy. They're crazy.
Yeah. I agree.
Because for me, Sam Darnold, they'll give you a good example. I don't mind the contract. Like, I know what they're doing in Seattle because they can get out of it after 1 year. They can actually get out of it after 1 year the way they structured that contract. It's almost like a 1 year deal. So, like, for me, I don't mind trying to give these guys, if you give them 35, 40 million, fine. Give them the Baker Mayfield contract, fine. But these guys who are getting $50 million, like, they haven't, I don't get. Like, I know that's where it is, but what's Dak Prescott going to do for his team? Like, the fact that you see, like, someone like Patrick Mahomes who just restructured and all that is still, like, one of the bottom, like, he's in the top 10, but he's not even the top 5 of highest paid quarterbacks in the league when these, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's, even Josh Allen said, like, I don't want to take this money if it's going to infringe you on signing players that are going to help our team better. So, but Tua didn't care.
No. Show me the money, baby. Hey, guys, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. It's been a great discussion. It was an all-star panel, man. I thank you guys for joining me tonight. And I want to thank everybody else that was in the chat. You guys keep me going every night. You keep me going when I'm on here on Tuesday nights, man, with your questions and comments. It keeps the show going. It keeps me alive. Keeps a little hopium, got a little hopium. I still got a little hopium, so we'll see. But anyway, guys, thanks again. I appreciate it. We'll have this show on again next week, Tuesday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm in Houston. I keep forgetting I'm in Central Time. So please join me next week at 7:30 Eastern Time. We'll have some other good guests on and maybe some of the same guests. So we'll see. But thanks again for joining the show tonight. And thank you guys. And Evan, where can they find you again before we close off?
You can find me on the Finstock Sports Network on Finstock Overtime with Brett Lagasse and Greg Maney. You can catch me on the draft shows coming up at the end of April. Any breaking news that happens in Dolphins land, I'll have a show with Bobby. And if not, you want to find me on X at Finstanza. But you'll catch me also in the comments of all the shows on the network. Doesn't matter if it's wrestling, it doesn't matter if it's basketball, it doesn't matter if it's these 10th Street Boys, whatever it is, you'll catch me there.
Sounds great. And Curtis, where can they find you?
YouTube, baby. YouTube, aceperhead.com, and you'll find Curtis on there. Before I go, I just want to say, Evan and Sean, dude, it was real pleasure, man. You guys got a
too.
great personality. You bring good
Same.
stuff, man. I really enjoyed this panel. You guys were awesome. So
Appreciate
find me at YouTube, and you can find those guys. I'm sure you can do it. TikTok.
And it's ace per head, right?
Yeah, that's what they say. Ace per head.
Okay, all right.
I'm
All
terrible at this, man. I'm terrible.
right. That's all right. I got you 6, man.
Thank you, brother.
John, where can they find you?
Yeah, on Twitter. My handle is in my little window there. You're not going to get the most uplifting content, at least for now, but it is funny. I do try and be comedic.
I find you uplifting.
Sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't, but
It always lands with me, Sean. Always lands with me.
appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Sean. And if I remember correctly, you're ex-military too, right?
Yep, I served 4 years in the Army.
All
Thank you
right.
for your
Thanks.
service.
Thank you for your service, brother.
Absolutely.
That's what I was in the Army myself. All right, guys. Thanks again. Everybody have a great night. God bless. And remember, Dolphins #1, baby.
Not this year.
Dolphins